Hey, everybody, I'm Damon, I'm an alcoholic.
I'm David.
Tim found a way to get me to say something nice about him 2 weeks in a row. You better hold on to it, because Tim's a pretty good man. I met him about 13 years ago. He was working at Buffalo Valley when I went through there. Him and my counselor were two reasons why I ended up in Shelbyville. They suggested for me to go to Tony Rice Center. I'm truly grateful that they did that, because if I wouldn't have went to the center, there's no telling where I'd be. Tim's helped me a great deal. We've become pretty good friends. He's got a good knowledge of the book. If you go to his classes and you listen to it, you'll learn something if you open your mind. And I'm not going to talk any longer because people read, and he's got a good story, and I'm sure y'all get a lot out of it. And I really don't want to say nothing else nice about him anyway. His head will get big. Here's Tim.
Ooh-wee. I ain't been in front of this many people since the last time I had to go to court. My name's Tim, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here tonight amongst a room full of my kind of people. I say that with a heart full of love, because that's truly what everyone in this room is. You're my kind of people. You're just like me. I'll tell you something else, too. I am more nervous. I'm as nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. There's more of my family here tonight than there was at the last family reunion I went to. And I ain't going to be able to tell one lie. My sponsor's here, too. You know, there's some Al-Anon folks in here, too, so I got to tell this joke. There was an old drunk that came home one night, and, you know, his middle of winter, snow on the ground, big snowflakes hitting the ground, and this old drunk was pounding on the door of his house about 2 o'clock in the morning, and his good Al-Anon wife was just not going to let him in. You know, she learned the good stuff. You know, she learned not to enable him by any means. So finally, she got tired of hearing him beat on the door. And she finally got up and let him in. And he walks right in the house and picks up Fluffy, this great big old cat. Now, the cat was all warm and dry and comfortable. The cat was getting all the love and attention. And immediately the drunk got a resentment. So he walks in there and he picks up Fluffy the cat and throws the cat out in the snowstorm. Now, bear in mind, this good Al-Anon wife has not gotten her husband a hot cup of coffee or towel or nothing to make him comfortable. She's a good Al-Anon. So she goes outside and she picks up Fluffy the cat and she puts him in her lap, and she's got a real nice, warm, comfortable towel, just giving this cat all the love and attention. And she starts talking to the cat. And she says, Fluffy, that's all right. One of these days that old fool's going to die. And I'm going to cremate him and put his ashes in your litter box. She was a good Al-Anon. I'm grateful to that fellowship, too, because there probably wouldn't be some of us sitting in here if it hadn't been for a good Al-Anon. God bless y'all for what y'all do. I'm also extremely grateful, and I can't give a talk without doing this, because there's some people sitting in this room. Now, I ain't going to call you by name, but you know who you are. Y'all were here when I got here, and y'all loved me enough to keep these doors open for me. You knew I was coming. You didn't know my name. You didn't know what I looked like. You didn't even know if I'd bathed regular. But you welcomed me when I got here. And the many times that I chose to get up out of here and go back out and drink some more, every time I walked back in here, y'all said, we love you, keep coming back. Y'all were not critical of me. You didn't run me off. Now, I've been run out of some of the finest bars and honky-tonks in Shelbyville, but y'all never run me off from here. Y'all told me, we love you, keep coming back. I'm not going to stand up here tonight and spend 45 minutes, or I don't know, how long did y'all read? That's about how much I'll run over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to stand up here and talk for 45 minutes about what it's like to get drunk. I believe everybody in this room knows how to do that. not that we don't need to hear drunkalogs from time to time. It's just that I'm not very good at talking about getting drunk. I did it. I think every alcoholic remembers his first drink and his last one. By the way, my sobriety date is June the 6th of the year 2000. If your sobriety date is any different than mine, it's my sincere hope and prayer that those 2 days never get any closer together or any further apart. I took my first drink of alcohol when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. I think my mother probably remembers it better than I do. I don't. I acted a fool. I still remember the bottle. It was a half pint of very old Barton. It had a black shadow of a man with a top hat and cane on the front of it. I will never forget that for some reason. And Mom and Dad were taking us kids to the babysitter, and that dude slid out from under Dad's front seat. And I remembered seeing most of the adult males in my family drank, and I thought that was just something fun to do, and I thought that's what you did if you was grown. So I took this half pint of whiskey, and I slid it down in my britches and pulled my shirt out over it, and I thought, well, it's on now. And I took that half pint and went inside the babysitter's house, and I put it down on the floor in behind the commode in the bathroom. I did not know what a half pint of 80 proof bourbon would do to an 11-year-old boy, but it didn't take me very long to find out. I did some things that night that I would continue to do throughout my drinking career. Now that's what I call it, because I spent more time investing in that career than I did any other. I got drunk, I got sick, I puked all over everybody and everything. I went into a blackout, and I pissed a woman off. I would continue to do that with alcohol for the rest of my life as long as I continued to drink it. Now, I didn't drink a lot after that, but you know, it didn't take me very long to forget about being sick and and throwing up and all that kind of stuff. And how have y'all ever had a whooping with a fireplace shovel? This babysitter, I can't remember her name, but she took one of them little black metal fireplace shovel and beat me all over the house with it. I do remember that. But you know, it didn't take me very long to forget all about that pain and that misery and that sickness, but I remembered the effect, because you see, when I took my first drink of whiskey, I felt like I had found the fountain of youth. I was only 11. I felt like I had found that magic elixir. I automatically had found something that made me feel like I was a part of. You know the old expression, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I felt like I could do anything. It gave me powers. You know, I used to love action comic superheroes when I was a kid. And I'm going to tell you something, 2 or 3 drinks of bourbon and I could become any one of those superheroes I wanted to be. I could attract all the women. I could beat up all the guys, in my mind anyway. I could drive the fastest. And you know, I could drive better drunk. You know, we all believe that. You know, this went on and on with me. And I'll tell you now, this is Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I do believe in the third tradition. I am not going to talk about doing dope. I'll save that for another meeting. Although dope is part of my story, and I'll leave it at that. I drank a lot. I drank often. I drank every chance I could going through high school. I don't remember a lot about it. I do know that there was an old store in Chapel Hill, Tennessee called Beach's Market. And I remembered, somebody reminded me of this the other day. We were talking about it. I think it was Kenneth. And I remembered how I felt like I was some kind of big dude. I got an ego problem too, in case y'all didn't know that. I thought I was an awful big dude going into this market, and here I am, a teenager. And I think the drinking age back then was 21 or 18, whatever it was. And I could go in there and pull my money out and put it up on the counter, and the man that run that store would sell me beer and not ask me for no kind of ID. And that began to be the thing that we did nearly every night of the week. but particularly on Friday and Saturday night. I always wanted to be older and bigger and stronger and smarter than I ever was. I always wanted to hang out with older people. When I was a senior in high school, the Vietnam War was just winding down. It was about to be over with, but I joined the Army because my best friend wanted to, and I figured automatically upon joining the Army that I was going to come home a hero. I had that John Wayneism going on real bad. I figured I was going to be a hero. When I got home, I was going to have a chest full of medals so heavy I'd walk leaning to one side. I figured they'd put me in the back of a drop-top Cadillac and parade me down Lane Parkway with last year's homecoming queen. And I just knew that was what was going to happen to me. Unfortunately, my alcoholism and other addictions got in the way. I just knew I was going to be able to retire when I was 37. Unfortunately, alcohol and other things got in the way, and my homecoming was less than glamorous. I remember getting off the bus station at the old Tunes garage out here at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the only person there to greet me was my father. And no, I didn't have a chest full of medals. I didn't have a suitcase full of citations for whatever they call it, valor or bravery. I wanted to be brave all my life, but I ran around scared of everything and everyone in it. I sat at Mom and Dad's kitchen table more times than once, more times than I can remember, making these promises. You know how we do. I promise this time I'm going to do better. I'm going to do this. It was always I'm going to. I'm going to. I wore that out. And I sat at Mom and Dad's kitchen table and promised how I was going to do better. And so I figured I need to settle down and get married. Well, I did half of it. I got married. I didn't exactly settle down. My first marriage, I cannot blame anything in the world on this girl. I mean, she was only 15. I figured I'd get one young enough that I could raise her up like I wanted, and it did not work out. I always tell people, don't ask me for marriage or relationship advice. I'm in my 4th marriage. My track record would indicate that I'm pretty good at running them off. Keeping them ain't something I've been real good at. And I didn't keep her. Strange thing about it is we hated each other so much we married each other twice. Typical alcoholic behavior. I never was much of a husband. I didn't know how to act. You see, nothing had changed. I remember my company commander at Fort Hood told me one time, he said, "Tim, you're one of the best soldiers I got. You just don't know how to act. You don't act right." And that stayed with me for a long time, and I continued to just not act right. You know, I never for 1 minute figured out that alcohol might be the problem. I always thought my problems were based on what other people did or didn't do. Because I got drunk at that first wife for 5 years. And every time I'd have my head down in the bar, you know how we do. We're drunk and we're sitting there peeing all over ourselves, because that's just one of the things we do. No, I don't talk pretty about drinking. I'm not going to. And when we raise our head up long enough to order another beer, one of the first things that comes out of our mouths is, "Well, if she hadn't left, I wouldn't be drinking." Or if she'd come back, I'd quit. Or if I could marry me a nuddin, I'd quit. And that's what I did. I started going to jail. I'm not some big-time thug criminal, but I've seen the inside of jail enough to know that I don't want to go back. I do remember, I don't know if you've ever thanked God for a drink, but I did. I got arrested for public drunkenness one night, and the next morning, Dallas Bean showed up to pick me up, And they gave me my property envelope, and it was heavy. I had no idea what was in there. It was at the old Shelbyville City Jail. And I opened that dude up, and there was a whole pint of 100 proof red label Gordon's vodka with the seal ain't been broke on it. You see, if the seal ain't been broke, they got to give it back to you. I looked right straight up at the ceiling and said, thank God. I did. Now that's insane behavior. That is insane behavior. I got arrested again at 4 o'clock that afternoon for the same thing. And you know, I thought the police around here picked on me. I thought that the Shelbyville City Police Department and the Sheriff's Department literally rode around with my picture duct taped to the dash of their car. I found out later on in life that, you know, I really just was not that important. And I discovered, you know, there's something strange about that. Since I took my last drink of whiskey, they ain't bothered me no more. I figured out over a period of time that when I quit doing the things I was doing, they left me alone. I went to New Orleans for a little while, and boy, there come those promises again. You remember some of those promises, Mama? Mama, I'm going to go down to New Orleans, and the first thing, I'm going to get me a job on an offshore oil rig. I'm just going to do, I'm going to be big down there. Well, really, in reality, the only reason I went to New Orleans was that I heard about a party called Mardi Gras. And I figured they needed me down there. I'm just that kind of drunk. And I ended up living on the street and living in flop houses and sleeping in missions. I found out right quick what the New Orleans state bug is. It's the cockroach. They got big ones down there. And I used to try to leave a little glass of whiskey sitting on the floor beside my mattress. There was a mattress on the floor. That's what I slept on whenever I had the $3 to pay for it. And inevitably, one of those great big cockroaches would end up in my glass of whiskey. So I'd have to wake up and take him out and so I could have a drink. He didn't drink that much. Come on. I found out bourbon ain't too good for cockroaches. I lived a nasty existence down there. And I did. But you see, as long as I could drink, I didn't care. I did not care as long as I could drink. I came home in September of 1984. I done made all them promises again. And then I go out here in the parking lot of a bar and get shot, and I almost died from that. You know, my mother was the one that had to get those phone calls. I think there was a standing rule at Mom and Dad's house that if the phone rang after midnight, it was about Timmy. And it always was about Timmy. I don't think none of the rest of y'all ever called the house after midnight. Y'all are making me nervous. Y'all ain't invited next year. God bless y'all for coming. I thank you. I'm grateful you're here. You can come anytime you want. I did things to my family that no son or no brother should ever do. I saw my mother cry a lot of tears over me. I saw my brothers and my sisters look at me in anger and disgust. And as the grandkids got older and as my nieces and nephews got older and other people in the family got older and they saw me doing the kind of things I was doing, they were looking at me with the same amount of anger and disgust. But the one thing that they didn't do is they didn't understand. Because you see, these people aren't alcoholics and they're not drug addicts, and they could not understand why I was throwing away my life. And I knew they loved me. I knew they cared about me. And I knew any one of them would have helped me any way they could. You see, my family never abandoned me. They were always there for me. But I always thought I had to find my solutions in the bottom of a bottle or other things. Any kind of pain that I felt, from a headache to a hangnail and everything in between, my solution, every problem I ever had, was met with alcohol. On March the 7th, I'm going to hurry up and get through this because anyway. On March the 7th, 1987, I broke into the First United Methodist Church and set fire to the building. I was under the influence of alcohol and other things at the time, and most people would want to blame that on the alcohol and the other stuff. You see, I learned out of this book that I had to accept responsibility for my behavior. I had to accept the consequences for my behavior, and I have to accept consequences for my actions. God demands that of me. So I don't blame that incident on nothing and nobody but me. I did that. I went to prison and got sober for the first time, I thought. I stayed dry for a little over 9 years. During that period of time, I met and married a wonderful woman by the name of Linda Mott. Some of y'all remember her. I'm not going to stand here and say anything negative about that woman. For the most part, she was just as good as gold to me. She was a good wife, and for a little while, I was a good husband. But you see, I was not behaving like a child of God. I was practicing all my old character defects. The only thing I wasn't doing was drinking. I was doing everything else. I was lying and cheating and stealing and conning and manipulating, and I would walk 5 miles around the truth just to tell a good lie, because a lie to me sound better. Unfortunately, a drunk who is not drinking, who is living that way, who has done nothing to change his behavior or his thinking or his attitudes, who has not given himself to God, will eventually drink again. I listened to an Ed Mutum CD the other night. No, it wasn't. It was Clancy from out in California, and I was listening to his CD as I was going home. And he says that if all you do is just not drink, there will come a time when you will become so miserable that you will either commit suicide sober or you will drink again. And that's exactly what happened to me. I remember sitting out in the backyard. We lived in a little farmhouse right here in town, and I remember it was pouring down rain one night, and I had a half a gallon of whiskey. And I was sitting out in my backyard with the rain hitting my face, and I was crying, and I was screaming up to God, cursing God, and wanting to know why He let this monster back in my life. And you know, God answered that question for me. God did not allow that monster back in my life. I invited it back in, because I wasn't willing to change. I was not willing to give my life over to my will and my life, which is my thought and my actions. I wasn't willing to give that up. I wanted to hang on to my thinking and my way of doing things. And as long as I continued to want to hang on to my thinking and my way of doing things, it wasn't going to work for me. You see, I wanted this power greater than myself as long as everything was good, but the minute something went bad, or the minute it started getting too good, I wanted to take all the credit for it. And I didn't give credit where credit is due. I started drinking again, and I lost every single thing, and I do mean everything, that had come to me, that had been given to me by God and His fellowship over that 9-year period. That pretty wife of mine, Linda, we were together for 10 years. And we went to a movie in Tullahoma, and to make a long story short, we got home that night, and she went out to buy more beer, and I never saw her again. She was drinking herself, and her car left the road at over 85 miles an hour, and we ended up having to have a closed casket funeral for her. Her alcoholism killed her. And right then and there, at that moment, I knew that if something wasn't done in my life, that I'd be laying up there in the cemetery right beside her, and it wouldn't take me very long to get there. I knew that my alcoholism was destined to kill me too. You see, untreated addiction is 100% fatal. I knew something had to happen in my life. But right at that moment, I was also very angry at God because I was blaming God for this. You know, I don't believe today that God goes around indiscriminately killing people. I don't believe that. I know that she died that night as a result of her decision to drink and get behind the wheel of the car. The fact that she's gone is now God's will. But I had to find a way to live with it. For the next 3 weeks, I continued to drink. I think in some small way I wanted to die, but I wasn't brave enough or courageous enough. And those two words kind of sound stupid when you associate them with suicide. But I couldn't bring myself to commit that final act. And I never will forget it. God is so good, and God is so... Man, and this fellowship is so wonderful. I was sitting in a little rundown house trailer because that was all that was left. It was a rundown house trailer with a few meager possessions. And 3 people showed up from the Tony Rice Center to bring the message of recovery to me. They made an old-fashioned 12-step call. Can you imagine that? You know what happens when you call most people today and ask them, can they go help a drunk? They say, no, I can't go. My movie's on. I promised myself I wasn't going to get mad, and I'm not. The Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, or nobody in this room ever told me no, and that's why I'll never do it. I made a commitment when I got here that when a sick and suffering alcoholic would call me, that I was going to get up from wherever I was at and I was going to go help him, because that's exactly what was done for me. And I thank God for those 3 men. They brought me the message of recovery, and I never will forget what Jim Mettler said. God bless his soul. He kneeled in my floor and he said, Tim, do you want to continue the drunk or do you want to get sober? I think if that man had said anything else to me, I'd be dead today. He left the choice up to me. It wasn't long after that. Now here I was at 41 years old. And after 41 years of living on God's earth, I showed up at the Tony Rice Center with nothing but 2 Walmart bags full of clothes that Goodwill probably would have dumped in the garbage. I go to Goodwill to shop today, can't you tell? I was hopeless, helpless, and useless. Today I'm hopeful, helpful, and useful. I was godless. I didn't have any direction in my life. And today God is the most powerful thing in my life. It started from there. It wasn't very long after my arrival at the center I knew I had to make peace with the God that I was angry at. And me and that old dog, Jack, we used to go out back, and Jack was the best counselor the Tony Rice Center ever had, because he listened to everybody there and never passed any judgment against anybody. I'm not capable of doing that. I'm a human being. I made Jack a tombstone after it died. It said, old dogs care about you even when you make mistakes. And that old dog did. That dog became my buddy. I got my job back at the machine shop, and Dad would come pick me up in the morning, and me and Jack would be sitting out on the front porch waiting on him, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. Jack was my buddy. But I never will forget when I had my first spiritual awakening. I like to tell people this was the day that I invited God into my heart, and I was saved that day. I knelt down on that little old white wooden bridge and begged God to just do whatever with me He wanted me to do. And a feeling come over me like I have never, ever felt before. And I just knew that no matter what happened, I was going to be okay. I knew. And I knew from that moment I never had to take another drink. Not for today. I don't have to drink today. Today, the most important thing that happens in my life will happen at about 12 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, depends on when I get off the internet. I'll lay down and I'll go to sleep. I'll lay my head on my pillow and I won't have whiskey on my breath. That's the most important thing that happens to me every single day. God has been good to me. God has given me some people in my life that are priceless. God has walked beside me and given me the courage and the strength that I've needed to go through. I can't take credit for this because of myself I'm nothing. I ain't nobody but a drunk with a book. I've got friends that I can call anytime, day or night, and they'll be there to help me. Because you see, they believe in giving back too. And you know what? The people I call today and I say, hey man, you want to go with me on a 12-step call? Yeah, I'll be right there. Because that was what was done for me. Every single day, I get to be around the finest people that God put on this planet, and I'm talking about the people in this room. There's no better people on the face of this earth than a recovering alcoholic who's found God and found his fellowship and loves others as he loves God and loves himself. You know, I believe at the end of the day, God really does care about how we treat one another. This book says that our main object is to fit ourselves to be of maximum benefit to God and our fellow man. I don't believe God cares about what kind of car I drive, what kind of clothes I wear, or how much money I got in the bank. I believe God cares about the fact that I want to do for Him and for others. I believe that's what God cares about. This book tells me that, and I believe every word in this book. This book told me to stop playing God. And I didn't know I was doing that. I was running my life with my will and my thinking. That's playing God. I learned I had to fully concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. It says that on page 30 in this book. And the only thing that did that was all them beatings I took from a bottle of whiskey. I've heard the expression used around here quite often, well, he or she ain't had enough yet. And I believe that to be true. Mr. Hawkins used to say, winners do what losers don't. A winner ain't nothing but a loser that got tired of losing. I got tired of all them beatings I took from John Barleycorn. There are, of course, 12 promises in this book, and I forget who it was that read them. My mind just ain't what it used to be, and it never was very much, but I only got 2 or 3 or 4 brain cells left today, and they spend most of the time debating with one another. So, but you know, there's 12 dark promises in this book also, and the thing about these dark promises is that they have to come true first. I'm just going to read them right quick. Number 1, you will pass into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is to absolutely no avail. Number 2, you will place yourself beyond human aid. Number 3, your life will become impossible to manage. Number 4, no real alcoholic will ever control the desire to drink. Number 5, over any considerable period of time, you will get worse, never better. Number 6, you will reach that jumping off place and you will wish for the end. Number 7, you will have no effective mental defense against that first drink. You see, that defense must come from God. Number 8, you will suffer from a hopeless, helpless state of mind and body. Number 9, you will deal with incomprehensible demoralization. Number 10, you will know loneliness as few men do. Number 11, you will be unable to picture life with or without alcohol. And number 12, you will come to know those hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. The thing about those promises is that for people like you and me, they have to come true first. I had to concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic, and I had to give my disease to God. I had to give my will and my life to God, or I was never, ever going to get any better. I had to get into this book. Mr. Hawkins also said that if you will open your mind, this book will talk to you. I remember him saying that just as plain. And you know what? It will. It will. And you know this book was written using the book of James out of the Bible, the book of Corinthians out of the Bible. It was written also using readings out of the upper room. It was they also used the Varieties of Religious Experience written by William James, which was a series of 12 lectures on how men came to know God. This is all about God, man, and if it ain't good, it don't come from God. Without God, it don't work. I believe God inspired an old, drunk, broke stockbroker from New York to meet up with a drunk proctologist in Akron, Ohio in May of 1935. I believe that event was God-inspired. I do, because the first words Bill Wilson said to Dr. Bob Smith when he knocked on his door, he said, "Mr. Smith, I'm not here to help you, I'm here to help me." And the whole fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is based on the spirit of one drunk helping another. Why is it that so many of us have forgotten that? I had to surrender self to God. I had to discover, like the book says, that there is no middle of the road solution. You know as well as I do, this ain't rocket science. If I can do this, man, I graduated with a class of 23 people. And I ain't never been the sharpest crayon in the box. But I tell you what, I've just about gotten to where I can color inside the lines. With God's help, as long as God guides my hand, I can. If I ever take off and think I'm doing such a good job that I can do it without Him, I'll go to scribbling again. The book also told me that I have to be like the little gold miner, and I love this, you know. And I always picture the old 1800s, how them old gold miners was in the darkest recesses of them mines, and it's hot and it's sweaty, and all they got is a little coal oil lantern, and they're mining that gold, buddy. And that's who I got to be. The only thing that requires is that I come out of the gold mine at the end of the day and be willing to give away everything I dug up. That's what the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is. Being of maximum benefit to God and your fellow man. That's what it's all about. God has indeed been good to me. Man, I tell you, I've gone through human struggles just like anybody else would since I've taken my last drink. I told somebody here not long ago, you know, I know I'm having a good day today. I got up this morning and my name was not in the police blotter or the obituary column. And I'm still on this side of the dirt. Everything's just fine. Since I've been sober, I've gotten married again. I met this lady on, boy, I better get this right too. On August 1st of the year 2001. And we've been together ever since. And that was a God thing. I know it was. I get to wake up beside the person I love the most every morning. I do. I have a person in my life who totally supports anything and everything I do, as long as it's the right thing to do. She will not support bad behavior out of me. She not only won't support it, she won't tolerate it. And I know that going in, so. God has put people around me. Man, I've got a sponsor, you know, and I don't believe Damon knows much about rocket science either, but he knows a little bit about this book, and I'll go to him with a problem, and the first words out of his mouth are, what's the book say? What does the book say about this? What does the book say about that? That's a good man right there. He makes time for people. I don't know anybody else. I know there's other people out there that does what he does, but he just happens to be the only one I know that literally has given his entire life to helping people like me. I'm extremely grateful for that. And no, he does not tell me what I want to hear. A sponsor like that would kill me. He tells me things that I need to hear. I'm in a position to where I learn from people every day. You guys are the greatest teachers in the world. I promise you, I will learn more from you than you will ever learn from me. And that's of God. I was diagnosed with and operated on for cancer, and I didn't have to drink. You remember I told you I used to drink over hangnails. That's crazy. I drank only on days ending in Y. I had to have gallbladder surgery, and I didn't drink. I lost my father on Christmas Day nearly 4 years ago. And when I got that phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning, my first thought was not a drink of whiskey. That's amazing. That's a miracle. I'm so grateful that my daddy got to live long enough to see me get sober again. I'm glad that he and I had the kind of relationship that I had wanted to have with him for all those years, and I was never able to have because a bottle of whiskey stood between us. And no, it wasn't his bottle, it was mine. After I got sober, I came to know and love my father for the kind of man that he was. And his memory will always be precious to me. You know what? I don't make my mama cry anymore unless she's tearing up a little bit right now, and I can't tell because my eyes don't work that good. She don't get phone calls from the jail at 1 o'clock in the morning anymore. She don't get phone calls from the emergency room out here saying, ma'am, your son's got a bullet hole in him. You need to get down here. No, she don't get those kind of phone calls no more. I no longer have to be restrained by somebody because I'm drunk and going out of my mind. I'm going to tell you something about a man named Cody Harris, too. He's not here tonight, but I wish he were. Now, when I first met that guy, it wasn't under the most pleasurable conditions, but you know what? He didn't know me. He didn't know a thing about me. But I was laying out there in the hospital going into DTs, and he took time out of his day to come out there and hold my hand for a solid hour, telling me it was going to be okay. You see, that's the kind of love we have for one another in here. Recovering alcoholics are the greatest people in the world. You know, I don't know if what I'm doing is going to guarantee that the gates of heaven are going to open for me. But I do know that this right here knocked down the gates of hell and let me out. I know that. I do know that if I were to wake up in the arms of Jesus before this night's over with, that I wouldn't breathe whiskey in his face. And man, I love that. I hope and pray that when I meet God, that my breath will be clean, and my eyes will be clean, and my heart will be clean. And I'll go to that place grateful to you people for giving it to me. Y'all did this. I always plan on reading some stuff because I'm not intelligent enough or smart enough to create stuff. So I just find stuff that I like to read, and I want to read one thing in particular, and I better find it. The good stuff, man, I could talk about the good stuff all night. And I know some of y'all done gone to looking at your watch, and you ready to go. So my wife wrote me this letter not long after we got married, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. The greatest thing that could have ever happened was us. There was a reason for you and I being together. Now you have a chance to be a loving dad and pawpaw to the children that are a part of me. No one has really given the girls a chance, and she's talking about her 2 daughters, to be loved the way that you love them. I just want to thank you for being their dad and their little one's pawpaw. Now the grandchildren will have a pawpaw who will be there for them if they should ever need them. I'm going to tell you something. I've been called a lot of names in my life, but I ain't never heard nothing that sounds no sweeter than the word pawpaw. That's just cool. I couldn't do that with a bottle of whiskey in my hand. I couldn't be a husband. I couldn't be a father. I couldn't hold a job with a bottle of whiskey in my hand. I've learned that I can't do anything about tomorrow, and that yesterday is gone. And the most important day of my life is the one I'm living in right now. I learned some real valuable lessons from little people. My little grandson, Biddy, he was 7 years old. Had on a brand new pair of tennis shoes. And he was out in the backyard splashing in the mud puddles. And at that point in time, I knew that that child was not thinking for 1 minute about how much money those shoes cost or nothing. So I asked him, I said, Biddy, why are you doing that? He just looked up at me almost with an annoyed look and said, 'Cause it's fun, Pawpaw. I said, well, okay. I took my shoes and socks off and I was jumping with him too. As you go through life, don't forget to step in a mud puddle from time to time. Don't forget to play in the rain. Don't forget how to have fun. Man, if this couldn't be fun, I wouldn't want no part of it. A bunch of us went over to Timms Ford Lake here a couple of weeks ago, and And I ain't been swimming in a long time. So I dived in the water too. Why? Because it was fun. And I was around a bunch of sober people, and everybody was laughing. Everybody was having a good time. Wasn't nobody worried about, did my pass get approved, or am I behind on my rent? It wasn't none of that going on. It was just all about having a good time. So you know what we did the other night at the center? I got to tell this. Right after class, I was talking about the value of taking your little child out that lives within each and every one of us. Take him out and play with him every once in a while. So right after class the other night, we all went out in the backyard and played in the mud. Had a ball. I saw a bunch of grown men laughing, getting muddy, getting dirty, and that was the only thing we was concerned about, just seeing how much mud we could pack on. Man, I enjoyed that so much, but see, y'all teach me so much too. Rule number 62 of this fellowship, and I don't even know what the other 61 are, but I read that rule number 62 says, don't take yourself too seriously. God wants us to have fun. He wants us to have joy with one another. He wants us to do that. I'm going to read one more thing, and then I'm through, I promise. I love this poem. I did not write it. It's not really a poem, it's a prayer. It was written by an old Indian chief, but I love it. It's a perfect prayer for recovery. It says, O great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, hear me. I come before you, one of your many children. I am small and I am weak. I need your strength and your wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made. My ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may know the things you have taught my people. The lesson you have hidden in every leaf and rock. I seek strength not to be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame. Thank you.